The first punch broke Celine's ribs. The second cracked something deeper. She curled around her newborn daughter on the floor while Damien Vale stood over her, screaming that she'd failed him again. Another girl, not the son he needed. Blood pooled under her cheek. Her 3-year-old cried in the corner. Then the front door exploded inward, and the most dangerous man in the city stepped through the smoke with a gun in his hand and murder in his eyes. Roman DaCosta hadn't come to save her. He'd come for business. But when he saw what Damien had done, everything changed. If you want to know how a crime lord became a father and a broken woman became whole, stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Sut. The brownstone on Hathaway Street looked like every other house on the block. Red brick, iron railing, a willow tree out front that hadn't been trimmed in years. Inside, the walls were thin enough to hear the neighbor's television through the plaster, and the floorboards creaked no matter how carefully you walked. It was the kind of place people passed without looking twice, which was exactly why Damien Vale had chosen it. Celine had learned not to make noise. She sat on the bathroom floor with her back against the tub, her 3-year-old daughter Iris asleep in her arms, and tried to keep her breathing quiet. The baby, Maya, born 6 hours ago in the same bathroom with no doctor and no drugs, was wrapped in a towel on the sink counter, still slick and red-faced and blessedly silent. Celine's hands shook, her vision blurred at the edges. She could feel the blood soaking through the old towels she'd packed between her legs, could feel the way her body was still trying to push something out that wasn't there anymore. But she couldn't move yet. Damien was in the next room and she could hear him pacing. "Another girl," he said, and his voice was low, controlled, the kind of quiet that made her skin go cold. "You gave me another goddamn girl." Celine closed her eyes. She wanted to say that she hadn't given him anything, that biology didn't work the way he thought it did, that this wasn't something she could control. But she'd learned a long time ago that logic didn't matter to men like Damien. What mattered was what he wanted, and what he wanted was a son, an heir, someone to carry his name into whatever empire he thought he was building in the filthy underworld of this city. 2 daughters meant she'd failed him twice. The pacing stopped. Celine's breath caught. The bathroom door opened. Damien stood in the doorway, backlit by the hallway light, his face in shadow. He was a big man, broad-shouldered and thick-necked, with hands that looked like they could crush stone. Celine had thought he was handsome once, years ago, before she understood what lived behind his eyes. "Get up," Damien said. Celine didn't move. Iris stirred in her arms, made a soft sound, settled again. "I said get up." His voice was still quiet, still controlled. Celine shifted Iris gently to the floor, tucked a towel around her, and tried to stand. Her legs barely held her. She braced one hand against the sink, the other against the wall, and forced herself upright. Her vision swam. She could feel fresh blood sliding down her thighs. Damien looked at the baby on the counter. His jaw tightened. "You knew what I needed," he said. "I know." Celine's voice came out hoarse, cracked. "I'm sorry." "You're sorry." "I didn't." The first punch caught her across the face before she could finish. Her head snapped back, struck the tile wall, and the world went white. She crumpled, tried to catch herself, felt her knees hit the floor. Iris screamed. The baby started crying. Celine tasted copper and salt, felt her mouth filling with blood. Damien grabbed her hair and dragged her out of the bathroom. She tried to fight, tried to twist away, claw at his wrist, anything, but her body was broken and empty, and she had nothing left. He threw her into the living room, and she hit the coffee table, felt something crack in her ribs, rolled onto her side, gasping. "You think I keep you for fun?" Damien crouched next to her, grabbed her chin, forced her to look at him. "You think I married you because I liked you?" Celine couldn't breathe, couldn't speak. "You were supposed to be useful," he said. "That was the deal. Your family owed mine, and you were the payment. All you had to do was give me a son, and you can't even do that right." He let go of her face and stood. Celine curled onto her side, wrapped her arms around her ribs, tried to pull air into her lungs. Iris was still screaming in the bathroom. The baby's cries were getting weaker. Damien walked to the window, looked out at the street. His shoulders were tense. He was breathing hard. "I should have known," he said. "Your father was weak. Your brothers were weak. I thought maybe you'd be different, but you're just like the rest of them." Celine wanted to tell him that her father had been a good man, that her brothers had tried to protect her, that the only reason she'd agreed to marry Damien was because he'd threatened to kill them all if she didn't. But her mouth wasn't working right and her ribs were on fire and she couldn't think past the pain. Damien turned away from the window, looked down at her. "I'm done," he said. Celine's heart stopped. "Wait," she whispered. "You're no use to me anymore." He pulled a gun from the back of his waistband, checked the chamber. "And I'm not feeding 3 mouths when I don't have to." "Please." Celine tried to sit up, couldn't. "Please, they're just babies. They didn't—" "They're girls." Damien's voice was flat. "They're worthless." He aimed the gun at her head. Celine closed her eyes. The front door exploded. Not opened. Exploded. The frame splintered, the lock tore free, and the door slammed inward so hard it bounced off the wall and swung back. Smoke poured into the room, thick and acrid, and through it came a man Celine had only ever seen in photographs, a man whose name people didn't say out loud unless they were drunk or stupid or both. Roman DaCosta stepped into the living room like he owned it. He was tall, lean, dark-haired, dressed in a black coat that looked like it cost more than Celine's entire house. His face was all sharp angles and cold eyes, the kind of face that didn't smile, didn't soften, didn't give anything away. He had a gun in his right hand and 2 men behind him, both armed, both scanning the room like they expected a fight. Damien spun, raised his own weapon, but Roman was faster. He fired once, and Damien's gun flew out of his hand, clattered across the floor. Damien staggered back, clutching his wrist, blood streaming between his fingers. "What the hell?" "Shut up," Roman said. His voice was quiet, calm, but it cut through the room like a blade, and Damien shut up. Roman's gaze swept the space, took in the overturned table, the blood on the floor. Celine curled on her side, trying not to sob. His jaw tightened. He looked at Damien. "We need to talk," Roman said. "This isn't your business, DaCosta. You made it my business when you tried to cut a deal with the Volkovs using my name." Roman stepped closer. "Did you think I wouldn't find out?" Damien's face went pale. "I didn't. You told them I'd back you on the dockyard shipment. You told them I'd guarantee delivery. You used my reputation to close a deal you had no intention of honoring, and now the Volkovs think I'm a liar." Roman's voice stayed level, but there was something underneath it now, something cold and sharp. "So yeah, this is my business." Damien glanced at the gun on the floor, too far to reach. "I can explain." "I don't want an explanation." Roman looked at Celine again, then at the bathroom where Iris was still crying. His expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. "I want you to fix it." "I will. I'll call them. Roman raised the gun and shot Damien in the knee. Damien screamed, collapsed, clutched his leg. Blood poured through his fingers, pooled on the hardwood. Roman stepped over him without looking down, crossed to Celine, crouched next to her. "Can you stand?" he asked. Celine stared at him. Her ears were ringing. She couldn't process what was happening. "Can you stand?" Roman repeated. "I don't—" Her voice broke. I just... Roman looked over his shoulder at one of the men behind him. "Marco, get the kids." Marco disappeared into the bathroom. A moment later, he came back with Iris in his arms and the baby wrapped in a towel. Iris was sobbing, terrified, but Marco was talking to her softly, telling her it was okay, she was safe. Roman looked back at Celine. "I'm getting you out of here." "Why?" The word came out barely audible. "Because I'm not leaving you in a house with a man who is about to put a bullet in your head." Roman's tone was matter-of-fact, like this was obvious. "Now, can you stand, or do I need to carry you?" Celine tried. She got one hand under her, pushed, felt her ribs scream in protest. She made it halfway up before her legs gave out. Roman caught her before she hit the floor. He stood, lifting her with him, one arm under her knees and the other around her back. She was too weak to fight, too shocked to protest. She just hung there in his arms, bleeding onto his expensive coat, while Damien screamed on the floor behind them. "You can't do this," Damien snarled. "She's my wife. Those are my kids. You can't just—" Roman paused in the doorway, looked back. "Try to stop me," he said. Then he walked out. The car was black, sleek, armored. Celine could tell it was armored by the way the door closed. Too heavy, too solid. Marco slid into the driver's seat with Iris and the baby. Another man, tall, bald, silent, got into the passenger side. Roman climbed into the back with Celine still in his arms, settled her onto the seat, and shut the door. "Hospital," he said. "Boss, if we take her to a hospital, there'll be questions," Marco said. "Then take her to Levine." Marco nodded, started the engine. Celine tried to sit up. Her ribs stabbed at her and she gasped, sagged back against the leather. Roman was watching her, his face unreadable. "Who's Levine?" she managed. "A doctor who doesn't ask questions." "I can't pay." "I'm not asking you to." Celine didn't understand. She looked at Iris, who was clinging to Marco's shoulder, her face buried in his jacket, looked at the baby, still wrapped in a towel, impossibly small in Marco's other arm. Looked back at Roman. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. Roman was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "I didn't come here for you." "I know. I came here because your husband is an idiot who tried to use my name to cover his own deals, and I don't let that slide." "Okay. But I'm not going to walk into a house, see a man about to murder his wife and kids, and pretend I didn't see it." Roman's voice was still calm, still controlled. "So I'm getting you somewhere safe. After that, you're not my problem." Celine wanted to laugh, or cry, or both. She couldn't tell anymore. "Thank you," she whispered. Roman didn't respond. He looked out the window, his jaw tight, and didn't say another word for the rest of the drive. Asien. Levine turned out to be a short, round woman in her 50s who worked out of a nondescript building downtown that smelled like antiseptic and burnt coffee. She took one look at Celine and started barking orders at Roman's men, clearing off the exam table, pulling out equipment, snapping on gloves. "Out," she said to Roman. "I need to." "Out. You can intimidate people on your own time. Right now I have work to do." Roman left. Marco stayed long enough to hand over Iris and the baby, then followed. Levine worked fast. She checked Celine's ribs, 3 cracked, not broken, cleaned the cuts on her face, stitched the split in her lip. She examined the baby, declared her small but healthy, swaddled her in a clean blanket. She gave Iris a lollipop and a stuffed rabbit and set her in a corner with a pile of books. "You're lucky," Levine said, pressing an ice pack to Celine's ribs. "Another inch to the left and that punch would have punctured a lung." "I don't feel lucky." "You're alive. Your kids are alive. That's more than most people get when Roman DaCosta kicks down their door." Levine's expression softened. "What's your name?" "Celine." "Okay, Celine, I'm going to give you some painkillers, some antibiotics, and a lecture about what happens if you go back to that house." "I'm not going back." "Good. Because if you do, you won't survive it." Levine handed her 2 bottles of pills. "Take these twice a day. Rest, eat, don't do anything stupid." "Where am I supposed to go?" Levine shrugged. "That's between you and the man outside." "Check." Roman was leaning against the wall in the hallway when Celine limped out of the exam room, Iris holding her hand and the baby asleep in her arms. He straightened, looked her over. "You good?" he asked. "Good is a strong word." "Can you walk?" "Barely." Roman nodded. "Marco's bringing the car around. We're going to my estate." Celine stopped. "What?" "You heard me. I can't." She shook her head. "I don't have money. I can't pay you back for any of this." "I'm not asking you to." "Then what do you want?" Roman looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, "I want you and your kids somewhere Damien Vale can't find you. My estate is the safest place in this city. You'll stay there until I figure out what to do with your husband. You're just going to let me live in your house. For now." "Why?" Roman's jaw tightened. "Because I'm not leaving you on the street." Celine didn't know what to say. She looked down at Iris, who was staring up at Roman with wide, wary eyes. Looked at the baby, still asleep, oblivious. "Okay," she said quietly. Roman turned and walked toward the exit. The estate was on the north side of the city, hidden behind high walls and iron gates and enough security to guard a small country. The house itself was massive, 3 stories of stone and glass, surrounded by gardens that looked like they'd been cut from a magazine. Celine had never seen anything like it. Marco carried Iris inside while another man, silent, efficient, took the baby. Roman led Celine through a marble foyer, down a hallway lined with art that probably cost more than she'd earn in a lifetime, and up a wide staircase to the second floor. "This is your room," he said, opening a door. The room was bigger than Celine's entire apartment. King-sized bed, plush carpet, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the gardens. There was a bathroom attached, all white tile and gold fixtures, and a walk-in closet that was currently empty. "The kids can stay in the room next door," Roman said. "There's a crib, toys, whatever you need. If you need anything else, tell Marco." Celine stared at him. "I don't understand." "What's not to understand? Why are you doing this? You don't know me. You don't owe me anything." Roman's expression was unreadable. "You're right, I don't." "Then, but I saw what your husband was about to do, and I'm not going to pretend I didn't." He stepped back into the hallway. "Get some rest. We'll talk in the morning." He closed the door before she could respond. Celine stood there for a long time, holding her broken ribs, staring at the bed. Then she walked to the window and looked out at the gardens, at the high walls, at the city lights beyond. She didn't cry. She was too tired to cry. But for the first time in years, she let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, she was safe. Celine woke to sunlight streaming through the windows and Iris curled against her side. For a moment she forgot where she was, and panic spiked through her chest. Then she remembered. The brownstone, Damien, the gunshot, Roman. She sat up slowly, wincing as her ribs protested. The baby was in a bassinet next to the bed, still asleep. Someone must have brought it in during the night. There was a knock on the door. "Come in," Celine said. A woman in her 30s stepped inside, carrying a tray. She had dark hair pulled into a bun and kind eyes. "Morning, I'm Anna. I work here. Brought you breakfast." Celine blinked. "You didn't have to—" "Boss's orders." Anna set the tray on the nightstand. Toast, eggs, fruit, coffee. "He said to make sure you ate." "Oh," Anna smiled. "There's clothes in the closet. Should fit. If they don't, let me know and I'll get something else." "Thank you." Anna left. Celine stared at the tray, at the food she hadn't cooked, at the coffee she hadn't made. Iris stirred, opened her eyes, looked around. "Mama?" "I'm here, baby." "Where are we?" "Somewhere safe." Iris sat up, rubbed her eyes. "Is Daddy here?" Celine's chest tightened. "No." "Good." Iris's voice was small but firm. "I don't like Daddy." Celine pulled her daughter close and held on tight. Later, after Iris had eaten and the baby had been fed and changed, Celine ventured downstairs. The house was quiet, almost unnervingly so. She found Marco in the kitchen, drinking coffee and reading a newspaper. "Morning," he said. "Morning." "Boss wants to see you. He's in his office." Celine's stomach twisted. "Now?" "When you're ready." She nodded, took a breath, and followed Marco's directions down another hallway to a heavy oak door. She knocked. "Come in," Roman's voice called. Celine opened the door. Roman's office was all dark wood and leather, shelves lined with books, a massive desk in the center. Roman sat behind it, tie loosened, sleeves rolled up, looking at a file. He glanced up when she entered. "Sit," he said. Celine sat. Roman closed the file, leaned back in his chair. "How are you feeling?" "Like I got hit by a truck. That's about right?" He studied her. "Levine said you need to rest for at least a week, longer if you want the ribs to heal properly." "I can't stay here for a week." "Why not?" "Because, Celine stopped. She didn't have a good answer. "I don't want to be a burden." "You're not." "You don't even know me." "I know enough." Celine looked down at her hands. "What happens to Damien?" Roman's expression didn't change. "What do you want to happen to him?" "I want him to never come near me or my daughters again." "Done." "That's it?" "That's it." Roman's voice was flat. "Damien Vale is a liar and an idiot, and he tried to use my name to cover his deals. That's bad for business, so I'm shutting him down. He won't bother you." "You're just going to let him live?" Roman's eyes were cold. "For now." Celine didn't push. She didn't want to know what for now meant. "What about me?" she asked. "What about you?" What do you want from me? Roman was silent for a long moment. Then he said, I want you to stay here until you're healed. After that, if you want to leave, you can leave. If you want to stay, you can stay. Your choice. Why would I stay? Because out there you've got no money, no job, no family, and a husband who wants you dead. Roman's tone was matter-of-fact. In here, you've got a roof, food, security, and time to figure out what comes next. Celine wanted to argue, wanted to say she could take care of herself, that she didn't need his help. But she looked at him, at this man who'd kicked down her door and saved her life for no reason other than he'd seen something he couldn't ignore, and the words wouldn't come. Okay, she said quietly. Roman nodded. Good. He opened the file again, started reading. Celine stood, turned to leave. Celine. She stopped. You're safe here, Roman said without looking up. No one's going to hurt you. Celine didn't know if she believed him, but she wanted to. Thank you, she said, and she left. The days blurred together. Celine spent most of her time in her room, resting, healing, trying to process everything that had happened. Iris adjusted faster than Celine expected. She explored the house, played in the gardens, followed Anna around like a shadow. The baby slept and ate and grew, oblivious to the fact that her world had been turned upside down. Roman was a ghost. Celine saw him occasionally, passing in the hallway, sitting in his office, speaking quietly to Marco, but he never approached her, never asked her for anything. It was like he'd forgotten she was there. Except he hadn't. Because every morning there was breakfast waiting in her room. Every afternoon Anna brought clean clothes, books, whatever Celine needed. Every evening someone checked to make sure she had everything for the night. It was unnerving and oddly comforting. On the 5th day, Celine's ribs hurt less and she could breathe without wincing. She ventured outside into the gardens and found Roman sitting on a bench near a fountain, smoking a cigarette and staring at nothing. She almost turned back, but something made her walk over. Can I sit? She asked. Roman glanced at her, nodded. Celine sat. They were quiet for a while, listening to the water. You don't smoke in the house, Celine said. No. Why not? Bad for the kids. Celine looked at him. Roman was staring at the fountain, his face unreadable. You don't have kids, she said. No. But you're thinking about mine. Roman took a drag, exhaled slowly. Your oldest, Iris. She's 3? Yes. She's brave. Celine blinked. What? Last night she asked Marco if I was a bad man. Roman's voice was flat. Marco didn't know what to say, so he came and asked me. I told him to tell her the truth, which is that I've done bad things. But I'm not going to hurt her. Roman looked at Celine. She said okay. Then she asked if I was going to hurt you. Celine's throat tightened. I told her no, Roman said. What did she say? She said good. Then she went back to bed. Roman flicked ash off the cigarette. She's 3 years old, and she's already learned to check if the people around her are dangerous. That's not normal. No, Celine said quietly. It's not. What did Damien do to you? Celine looked away. Does it matter? Yes. Why? Because I need to know how far he'll go to get you back. Celine's chest tightened. He won't come for me. You sure about that? He doesn't love me. He never did. I was just... She stopped, swallowed. I was just a bargaining chip. My family owed his and I was the payment, that's all. Roman was quiet. Then he said, What did your family owe? I don't know. My father never told me. Celine's voice was bitter. He just said I had to marry Damien, or people would get hurt. So I did. And Damien? He wanted a son, an heir. He thought I'd give him one, and when I didn't, she couldn't finish. Roman crushed out the cigarette. He's not getting you back. You don't have to. I'm not doing this for you. Roman stood. I'm doing it because Damien Vale is a liar and a coward, and I don't let people like that operate in my city. You and your kids are just collateral. He walked away before Celine could respond. She sat there for a long time, staring at the fountain, trying to figure out if she believed him. Autumn. On the 7th day, Celine found Iris in the library, sitting on the floor with a picture book. Roman was sitting in a chair nearby, reading a file. ignoring her. Except he wasn't ignoring her, because when Iris turned the page and frowned, Roman glanced over. "What's wrong?" he asked. "I don't know this word." Iris pointed at the page. Roman leaned over, looked. "Elephant. Elefant. Elephant." Iris tried again, got it mostly right. Roman nodded and went back to his file. Celine stood in the doorway watching. Iris looked up, saw her, smiled. "Mama, Mr. Roman is helping me read." Roman didn't look up. She asked. "I didn't say anything," Celine said. "I know." Iris went back to her book. Roman kept reading. Celine walked over, sat on the floor next to her daughter. "You don't have to do this," she said quietly. "Do what?" "Pretend you care." Roman finally looked at her. His eyes were cold, unreadable. "I'm not pretending." "Then what are you doing?" "Reading a file." "You know what I mean." Roman closed the file, set it aside. "Your kid is 3 years old and she's scared of every man she meets except Marco. That's a problem. So I'm showing her that not every man is going to hit her." Celine's breath caught. "That's it," Roman said. "Don't read into it." He stood and walked out. Iris looked up at Celine. "Is Mr. Roman mad?" "No, baby," Celine said. "He's just complicated." "What's complicated?" "It means he's hard to understand." Iris thought about that. Then she said, "I like him." Celine didn't know what to say, so she just hugged her daughter and tried not to cry. That night, Celine couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the baby breathe. Her ribs ached. Her mind wouldn't stop. She got up, pulled on a robe, and walked downstairs. The house was dark, silent. She wandered through the hallways, not really going anywhere, just moving. She found herself in the kitchen, made tea, stood by the window looking out at the gardens. Can't sleep? Celine jumped, spun around. Roman was standing in the doorway, barefoot, wearing a t-shirt and jeans. He looked tired. "Sorry," Celine said. "I didn't mean to—" "It's fine." Roman crossed to the counter, poured himself a glass of water. "I don't sleep much either." They stood there in silence. Celine sipped her tea. Roman drank his water. "Can I ask you something?" Celine said. "Sure." "Why do you live like this?" Roman raised an eyebrow. "Like what?" "Alone. In this giant house. With all these people working for you, but no one actually with you." Roman set down the glass. "That's a hell of a question." "You don't have to answer." "No, it's fine." He leaned against the counter. "I live like this because it's easier." "Easier than what?" "Than letting people in." Roman's voice was flat. "People are liabilities. They get hurt. They get used against you. They leave. So I don't let them in." Celine thought about that. "Sounds lonely." "It is." "Then why do it?" "Because I watched my father let people in, and it got my mother killed." Roman's eyes were dark. "So I learned. I built walls, and I don't let anyone pass them. Except me." Roman looked at her. "You're different." "How?" "Because you didn't ask to be here. You didn't try to manipulate me or use me or get something from me. You were just—" He stopped. "You were just someone who needed help, and I couldn't walk away." Celine's chest tightened. "I'm sorry about your mother." Roman's jaw tightened. "It was a long time ago." "That doesn't make it hurt less." "No," Roman said quietly. "It doesn't." They stood there in the dark, two broken people who didn't know how to fix themselves, and for the first time since Celine had walked into this house, she felt like maybe she wasn't completely alone. "Thank you," she said, "for everything." Roman nodded. "Get some sleep." He left. Celine finished her tea, went back upstairs, and for the first time in days, she slept without nightmares. The nightmares came back 3 days later. Celine woke gasping, clutching her ribs, the phantom pain of Damien's fist still fresh on her skin. The room was dark except for the moonlight spilling through the windows, and for a terrible moment she forgot where she was. She thought she was back in the brownstone, back on that blood-stained floor, waiting for the next punch that would finally break her. Then she heard Iris breathing softly in the bed beside her, felt the bassinet bump against her hand, and remembered. She sat up slowly, pressed her palms to her face, tried to steady her breathing. Her heart was hammering. Her hands were shaking. She couldn't go back to sleep like this. She got out of bed, pulled on the robe Anna had left folded on the dresser, and slipped into the hallway. The house was silent. She walked downstairs, her bare feet soundless on the carpet, and headed for the kitchen. Roman was already there. He was sitting at the island with a laptop open in front of him, his face lit by the blue glow of the screen. He didn't look up when she entered, but his voice cut through the quiet. "Another nightmare?" Celine stopped. "How did you know? You're the third person in this house who doesn't sleep." Roman closed the laptop, looked at her. "Tea? I can make it myself." "I know," but he was already standing, filling the kettle, setting it on the stove. "Sit." Celine sat. She watched him move through the kitchen with an efficiency that didn't match the rest of him. This man who ran half the criminal operations in the city, making tea at 2 in the morning like it was the most normal thing in the world. He set a mug in front of her, leaned against the counter with his own. "Same dream?" he asked. "Does it matter?" "Probably not." Roman sipped his tea. "But talking helps, or so I'm told." "You don't talk about yours." "No." "Then why should I?" Roman's mouth twitched, almost a smile. "Fair point." They drank in silence for a while. The house settled around them, creaking softly. Outside, the wind moved through the trees. "I dream about the bathroom floor," Celine said finally. "About the baby crying and Iris screaming and Damien standing over me with the gun. Except in the dream, you don't come. No one comes, and he pulls the trigger." Roman's jaw tightened. "He's not going to get near you again." "You keep saying that." "Because it's true." "How can you be sure?" Roman set down his mug. "Because 3 days ago I had Marco deliver a message to Damien Vale. I told him that if he so much as thinks about you or your daughters, I'll bury him in a hole so deep no one will ever find the body." Celine stared at him. "You didn't." "I did." "What did he say?" "Nothing. He's smart enough to know when he's beaten." Roman's eyes were cold. "He tried to use my name to cover his deals with the Volkovs. That puts him on my radar. And people on my radar don't last long if they keep making mistakes." "The Volkovs," Celine repeated. "Who are they?" "Russian crew. They run shipping out of the docks, move everything from stolen cars to guns to worse. Damien was trying to broker a deal using my reputation as collateral, which means if the deal went south, the Volkovs would come after me." Roman's voice was flat. "I don't appreciate that." "So you're using me to get back at him?" "No." Roman looked at her directly. "I'm using him making an enemy of me as an excuse to keep you safe. There's a difference." Celine didn't know what to say to that. She wrapped her hands around the mug, felt the warmth seep into her palms. "Why do you care?" she asked quietly. Roman was silent for a long time. Then he said, "My mother used to have nightmares." Celine looked up. "She'd wake up screaming," Roman continued, his voice carefully neutral. "My father would hold her until she calmed down, but it didn't help. She was terrified all the time. Of him, of his enemies, of what would happen to me if something went wrong." He paused. "She died when I was 12, shot in our own driveway because my father made a deal he couldn't keep." "Roman, I watched it happen. I was in the car. She pushed me down, told me to stay quiet, and then the window shattered and she was gone." Roman's eyes were distant, fixed on something Celine couldn't see. "My father didn't even look at her body. He just told his men to clean it up and went back to work." Celine felt something crack in her chest. "I'm sorry." "Don't be. It was a long time ago." Roman picked up his mug again, drained it. "But when I walked into that house and saw Damien standing over you with a gun, all I could see was my mother on that driveway. And I couldn't walk away." "You're not your father." "No, I'm worse." Roman's voice was bitter. "My father at least pretended to care about people. I don't bother." "That's not true." "Isn't it? You saved me. You saved my daughters. You're letting us live in your house, feeding us, protecting us. That's not nothing." Roman looked at her, and for a moment his expression softened, just a fraction. Then it was gone. "Get some sleep, Celine," he said. "You too." "I don't sleep." "Maybe you should try." Roman's mouth twitched again. "Maybe." He left the kitchen. Celine sat there alone, staring at her tea, and wondered how a man could be so broken and still hold himself together. The next morning, Iris refused to eat breakfast. I'm not hungry, she said, pushing her plate away. Celine frowned. You need to eat, baby. I don't want to. Iris, I said I don't want to. Iris's voice rose, sharp and panicked, and she started crying. Celine reached for her, but Iris flinched back. That flinch, so small, so instinctive, hit Celine like a punch to the gut. Hey, she said softly. Hey, it's okay. You don't have to eat if you don't want to. Daddy used to yell when I didn't eat, Iris sobbed. He said I was wasting food. Celine's throat closed. She pulled Iris into her lap, held her tight. Daddy's not here, and no one's going to yell at you. Promise? I promise. Iris cried into Celine's shoulder while the baby fussed in the bassinet and the eggs went cold on the plate. Anna appeared in the doorway, took one look at them, and quietly cleared the table without a word. Later, when Iris had finally calmed down and gone to play in the next room, Celine sat on the edge of the bed and put her face in her hands. She didn't hear Roman come in until he spoke. Anna told me what happened. Celine looked up. Roman was standing in the doorway, hands in his pockets, watching her. It's fine, she said. It's not fine. She's just adjusting. She's traumatized. Roman's voice was blunt. And she's 3 years old. That's not something she should have to carry. I know. Celine's voice cracked. But I don't know how to fix it. Roman stepped into the room. You can't fix it, not right away. But you can give her time, space, let her feel safe. She's scared of everything. Then show her she doesn't have to be. Celine looked at him. How? Roman hesitated. Then he said, Let me try something. 10 minutes later, Roman was sitting on the floor of the playroom with Iris, a pile of building blocks between them. Celine watched from the doorway, the baby asleep in her arms. What are we building? Iris asked. Whatever you want, Roman said. Iris picked up a red block, turned it over in her hands. Can we build a castle? Sure. With towers? As many as you want. Iris smiled, small and tentative, and started stacking blocks. Roman helped her, his large hands careful and precise, steadying the towers when they wobbled. My daddy never played with me, Iris said quietly. Roman didn't look up. Why not? He said it was boring. He was wrong. Iris glanced at him. You think so? Yeah, I think so. They built in silence for a while. Iris added a drawbridge made of flat blocks. Roman found a toy horse and set it inside the castle gate. Mr. Roman? Iris said. Yeah? Are you going to leave? Roman's hands stilled. What do you mean? Mama says people always leave. Are you going to leave too? Roman looked at Celine. She looked away, her chest tight. I'm not going anywhere, Roman said. Promise? I promise. Iris studied him for a long moment. Then she nodded, satisfied, and went back to building. Celine turned and walked out before Roman could see her cry. That night, Marco found Celine in the garden. She was sitting on the same bench where she'd talked to Roman days before, staring at the fountain. Boss wants to see you, Marco said. Celine's stomach twisted. Now? Yeah. She followed him inside down the hallway to Roman's office. Roman was at his desk, a file open in front of him. He gestured for her to sit. We need to talk about Damien, he said. Celine sat. What about him? He's not taking the hint. Roman slid a photograph across the desk. This was taken 2 hours ago. Celine looked at the photo. It showed Damien standing outside a bar, talking to 2 men she didn't recognize. One of them had a tattoo on his neck, a snake coiled around a dagger. Who are they? She asked. Volkov's men. Roman's voice was grim. Damien's trying to make another deal, and this time he's using you as leverage. What? He's telling the Volkovs that he has information about my operations, that his wife, his property, in his words, is living in my house, which means I've made an enemy of him. He's spinning it like I stole you to spite him. Roman leaned back in his chair. The Volkovs are interested. Celine felt cold. Why? Because if they can prove I'm protecting you, they can use it against me, make it look like I'm going soft, weak. That opens the door for them to move on my territory. So what do we do? We? Roman raised an eyebrow. You said I'm collateral. That makes this my problem too. Roman studied her. Then he said, I'm going to deal with it. How? You don't need to know. Yes, I do. Celine leaned forward. If this is about me, I deserve to know what you're planning. Roman was silent for a long moment. Then he said, I'm going to meet with the Volkovs. Convince them that Damien is lying, that you're nothing to me, just a woman I helped because it was convenient. Once they realize he's wasting their time, they'll cut him loose. And then? Then Damien's out of options. No allies, no leverage, no way to come after you without signing his own death warrant. Celine swallowed. What if they don't believe you? Then I'll make them believe me. Roman's eyes were hard, one way or another. Celine wanted to argue, wanted to tell him not to risk himself for her. But she looked at him, at this man who'd already saved her once, who'd promised Iris he wouldn't leave, who'd sat in the kitchen at 2 a.m. making tea because she couldn't sleep, and the words stuck in her throat. Be careful, she said instead. Roman's expression softened, just slightly. Always am. The meeting was set for 3 days later. Roman didn't tell Celine the details, but she could feel the tension in the house. The way Marco moved through the hallways with his hand always near his gun. The way the other men spoke in low voices and avoided her eyes. On the second day, Roman disappeared. Marco said he was handling business, but Celine knew better. She could see it in the way Anna moved around the kitchen. Too quiet, too careful. Something was wrong. That night, Celine put Iris to bed and sat in the nursery with the baby, rocking her gently. She tried not to think about what Roman was doing, where he was, whether he was safe. But her mind wouldn't stop. She heard footsteps in the hallway, heavy, uneven. She stood, laid the baby in the crib, and opened the door. Roman was leaning against the wall outside, his face pale, his shirt stained with blood. Jesus, Celine breathed. What happened? Meeting went badly. Roman's voice was rough. I'm fine. You're bleeding. It's not mine. Celine didn't believe him. She grabbed his arm, pulled him into the room, made him sit on the chair. He didn't fight her. She lifted his shirt. There was a gash along his ribs, deep but not fatal, already clotting. She pressed a towel against it, ignored his hiss of pain. You need stitches, she said. I've had worse. That's not reassuring. Roman laughed, short and bitter. Sorry. Celine worked in silence, cleaning the wound, wrapping it with gauze she found in the bathroom. Her hands were shaking. Roman watched her, his eyes dark. What happened? She asked again. The Volkovs didn't believe me, Roman said. They think I'm lying about you. They want proof. What kind of proof? They want to see you, talk to you, confirm that you're not important to me. Celine's hand stilled. And if I don't? Then they assume I'm lying and they move on my territory. People die. My people. Roman's jaw tightened. I won't let that happen. So what do you want me to do? I want you to come with me to the next meeting. Tell them the truth, that I helped you because Damien was an idiot, not because you mean anything to me. Convince them you're nobody. Celine looked at him. And if they don't believe me either, then I'll handle it. How? Roman didn't answer. Celine finished wrapping the wound, sat back. You're going to get yourself killed. Maybe. That's not funny. I'm not joking. Roman stood, winced, steadied himself against the chair. But I'm not letting them use you to tear down everything I've built. So I'll do whatever I have to do. Even if it means dying? Roman looked at her, and for the first time since she'd met him, his expression was raw, unguarded. I've been ready to die for a long time, he said quietly. But I'm not ready to let you and your daughters get caught in the crossfire. So yeah, even if it means dying. He left before she could respond. Celine sat in the dark nursery, listening to the baby breathe, and wondered how she'd ended up here, how she'd gone from a woman with no choices to a woman who might be the reason a man like Roman DaCosta didn't make it through the week. The meeting was set for the following night. Celine spent the day trying not to think about it, trying to keep Iris entertained, trying to pretend everything was normal. But her hands wouldn't stop shaking, and every time she looked at Roman across the room, she felt something twist in her chest. Anna cornered her in the kitchen that afternoon. "You don't have to do this," Anna said. "I know. Boss would understand if you said no." "Would he?" Anna hesitated. "Probably not, but he wouldn't hold it against you." Celine looked at her. "What would you do?" "I'd go." Anna's voice was firm. "Because the boss doesn't ask for help unless he really needs it, and if he needs it, then it's bad." "That's what I thought." Anna squeezed her shoulder. "Be careful." "I will." They left at dusk. Roman drove, Marco in the passenger seat, Celine in the back. No one spoke. The city slid past the windows, dark and cold, and Celine tried to ignore the knot in her stomach. They pulled up outside a warehouse on the south side, all rusted metal and broken windows. Roman killed the engine, looked back at her. "You don't have to say much," he said. "Just tell them the truth. That I helped you because it was convenient. That you're leaving as soon as you're healed. That I mean nothing to you." Celine's throat tightened. "Okay. And if anything goes wrong, you run. Don't look back. Marco will get you out." "What about you?" Roman's eyes were hard. "I'll be fine." He got out of the car. Celine followed. Inside, the warehouse was dim, lit by a few hanging bulbs. 5 men stood in the center, all armed, all watching. The one in the middle was older, gray-haired, with a scar running from his temple to his jaw. He smiled when he saw Roman. "DaCosta," he said, "you brought her." "I brought her." Roman's voice was flat. "Now, let's get this over with." The man looked at Celine. "Come here." Celine walked forward. Her legs felt like water. The man circled her slowly, studying her. "You're the wife," he said. "Yes." "Damien Vale's wife." "Not anymore." The man laughed. "He says you are. He says DaCosta stole you, that you're his whore now." Celine's face burned. "He's lying." "Is he?" "Yes." Celine forced herself to meet his eyes. "Roman helped me because my husband tried to kill me. That's it. I don't mean anything to him." "Then why are you still in his house?" "Because I have nowhere else to go." The man stepped closer. "You expect me to believe that DaCosta, a man who doesn't help anyone, saved you out of the goodness of his heart?" "I expect you to believe that he saved me because my husband tried to use his name to cover a bad deal, and Roman doesn't let that slide." Celine's voice was steady now, cold. "I'm nobody. Just a woman with 2 kids and no money. If you think I'm leverage, you're wrong." The man studied her. Then he looked at Roman. "She's convincing." "She's telling the truth," Roman said. "Maybe." The man smiled. "Or maybe you're both lying and I should just kill you now and take over your territory myself." Roman didn't move. "You could try." The man laughed. Then he pulled a gun and aimed it at Celine's head. "Let's test it," he said. "If she means nothing to you, you won't care if I pull this trigger." Celine's heart stopped. Roman's voice cut through the silence, cold and sharp. "Put the gun down, Victor." "Why? She's nobody, right?" "Put it down." Victor's smile widened. "I knew it. You're lying." "I'm not lying." Roman's hand moved to his own gun. "But if you pull that trigger, I will burn your entire operation to the ground. Every shipment, every deal, every man you have. I will destroy you." "Over a woman who means nothing?" Roman's eyes were ice. "Over the principle. You threaten what's mine, I don't let it go. So she is yours. She's under my protection. There's a difference." Victor lowered the gun, laughing. "You're slipping, DaCosta. You used to be smarter than this. And you used to know when to quit while you were ahead." Roman's voice was deadly quiet. "We're done here. Damien lied to you. Celine's nobody. Now back off, or I'll make sure you regret it." Victor holstered his gun. "Fine. But DaCosta, this isn't over." "Yeah," Roman said. "It is." He grabbed Celine's arm and pulled her toward the door. Marco followed, gun drawn, watching the room. They made it to the car, climbed in, and Roman floored it. They drove in silence for 10 minutes. Then Celine said, "You told him I'm under your protection." "I had to." That's not what we agreed. I know. Roman's hands were tight on the wheel. But he was going to kill you, and I couldn't let that happen. Why not? Roman didn't answer. Why not? Celine repeated. Roman pulled over, killed the engine, turned to face her. His eyes were blazing. Because I've already lost one woman I couldn't protect, he said. I'm not losing another. Celine stared at him. Roman, I know what I said. I know I told you this was just business, but I lied. His voice was raw. You're not nobody, and I can't pretend you are. Celine's breath caught. I'm sorry, Roman said. I didn't mean for this to happen, but it did, and now we're both stuck with it. He started the car again and drove them home. Celine sat in the back seat, her mind spinning, and realized that everything had just changed. They didn't speak for the rest of the drive. When they pulled through the gates of the estate, Roman parked in the circular drive and sat there with the engine running, staring straight ahead. Marco got out without a word and disappeared into the house. Celine stayed in the back seat, her heart still hammering, trying to process what Roman had just said. Finally, she opened her door and walked around to the driver's side. Roman rolled down the window. You can't take that back, she said. I know. Victor's going to use it against you. Probably. Then why did you say it? Roman turned to look at her, and the expression on his face made her breath catch. Because it's true, and I'm tired of pretending it's not. He got out of the car, walked past her into the house. Celine stood there in the driveway, the cold night air biting at her skin, and felt the ground shift under her feet. She found him 20 minutes later in his office, standing by the window with a glass of whiskey in his hand. He didn't turn when she came in. You shouldn't be here, he said. Where should I be? Upstairs, with your kids. Somewhere safe. I am safe. Celine closed the door behind her. You made sure of that. Roman's jaw tightened. I made you a target. I was already a target. Damien made sure of that the day he married me. This is different. Roman turned to face her. Victor's not going to let this go. He saw the way I reacted when he pointed that gun at you, and now he knows. He knows you matter. So what are you going to do? I don't know yet. Roman drained the glass, set it down hard on the desk. But I need to figure it out fast, because if Victor moves first, people are going to die. Your people, my people, your husband's people. Hell, maybe even you. Roman's voice was bitter. This whole thing is a mess, and it's my fault. Celine crossed the room, stood in front of him. It's not your fault. You didn't ask for any of this. Neither did you. No, but I'm here anyway. She took a breath. And I'm not going anywhere. Roman stared at her. You should. Why? Because it's dangerous? Because Victor might come after me? I've been in danger my whole life, Roman. At least here I have a choice about it. What choice? The choice to stay, to fight, to stop running. Celine's voice was steady. I spent 3 years married to a man who treated me like property, and I couldn't do anything about it because I had no power, no money, no way out. But now I do, and I'm not going to waste it. Roman's eyes searched hers. You don't know what you're saying. Yes, I do. If you stay, you're part of this, all of it. The violence, the danger, I know. Celine stepped closer. But I'd rather be part of this with you than safe and alone somewhere else. Roman's breath hitched. For a moment he just looked at her, and Celine saw something raw and desperate in his eyes, something he'd been holding back for too long. Then he reached up, touched her face, his hand rough and warm against her cheek. I don't deserve this, he said quietly. Neither do I. But we're here anyway. He kissed her. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't soft. It was desperate and hungry and full of all the things neither of them knew how to say. Celine kissed him back, her hands fisting in his shirt, pulling him closer. She tasted whiskey and blood and something darker, something that scared her and thrilled her all at once. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathing hard. Roman rested his forehead against hers. This changes everything, he said. I know. Victor's going to come after us. Damien's going to come after us. Everyone's going to come after us. Then we deal with it. Celine's voice was firm. Together. Roman pulled back, looked at her. You're sure about this? No, but I'm doing it anyway. He laughed, short and rough. You're insane. Probably. Celine smiled. But so are you. Roman kissed her again, softer this time, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, Celine felt something other than fear. She felt alive. The next morning, everything was different and nothing had changed. Celine woke up in her own bed with Iris curled beside her and the baby asleep in the bassinet, and for a moment she wondered if she'd dreamed the whole thing. Then she went downstairs and saw Roman in the kitchen, and the way he looked at her, the way his eyes softened just slightly before he turned away, told her it was real. Anna was making pancakes. Marco was reading the paper. Everything looked normal. But Celine could feel the tension humming under the surface, could see it in the way Marco's hand stayed near his gun, the way Anna kept glancing at Roman like she was waiting for something to explode. Morning, Celine said. Roman nodded. Morning. Sleep okay? No. Yeah, me neither. Marco looked up from the paper, glanced between them, and went back to reading without a word. Anna flipped a pancake and pretended she wasn't listening. Iris came downstairs a few minutes later, dragging her stuffed rabbit. She climbed into Roman's lap without asking, settled there like she belonged. Mr. Roman, can we build another castle today? She asked. Roman's expression softened. Maybe later. Promise? Yeah, I promise. Iris smiled, content, and started eating the pancakes Anna put in front of her. Celine watched them, this man and her daughter, and felt something shift in her chest. It terrified her. But she didn't pull away. After breakfast, Roman pulled Marco aside. Celine didn't hear what they said, but she saw the way Marco's face went grim, saw him nod and leave the room. Roman came back to the table, sat down across from her. We need to talk, he said. About what? About what happens next. Celine glanced at Iris, who was playing with her rabbit on the floor. Not here. They went to his office. Roman closed the door, leaned against the desk. I had Marco do some digging, he said. Turns out Damien's been busier than I thought. What do you mean? He's not just working with the Volkovs. He's been talking to half a dozen other crews, spinning the same story, that I stole his wife, that I'm going soft, that now's the time to move on my territory. Roman's voice was tight. And some of them are listening. Celine's stomach dropped. How many? Enough. Roman ran a hand through his hair. I've spent 10 years building my reputation in this city. And now, because of Damien's lies and Victor's greed, it's all falling apart. So what do we do? I need to prove them wrong. Show them that I'm not weak, that this isn't a liability. Roman looked at her. But I can't do that without making things worse for you. What does that mean? It means if I go to war to protect my territory, you and your kids are going to be right in the middle of it, and I can't guarantee I can keep you safe. Celine took a breath. Then don't go to war. It's not that simple. Yes, it is. Celine stepped closer. You said it yourself. Damien's a liar. Victor's greedy. They're using me to get to you, but I'm not actually the problem, so stop treating me like I am. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting we cut off the source. If Damien's the one spreading the lies, then we deal with Damien. Roman's eyes narrowed. Deal with him how? I don't know. You're the crime lord. Figure it out. Roman stared at her. Then he laughed, short and sharp. You're serious? Yes. You want me to kill your husband? I didn't say that. Celine's voice was steady. I said deal with him, however you think is best. Roman was silent for a long moment. Then he said, if I do this, there's no going back. You understand that? I understand. And you're okay with it? Celine thought about Damien's fists, about the gun in her face, about the way he'd looked at their daughters like they were worthless. She thought about the nightmares she still had, the fear that still lived in her chest, the scars that would never fully heal. Yes, she said. I'm okay with it. Roman nodded slowly. Then I'll take care of it. He left that night with Marco and 3 other men. Celine didn't ask where they were going. She didn't want to know. She put Iris to bed, fed the baby, and sat in the nursery rocking chair, trying not to think about what was happening out there in the dark. Anna found her around midnight. You should get some rest, Anna said. I can't. He'll be fine. He always is. How do you know? Anna sat down on the floor, leaned against the wall. I've worked for Roman for 8 years. In that time, I've seen him walk into situations that should have killed him a dozen times over, and every time he walks back out. What if this time is different? It won't be. You sound sure. I am. Anna smiled faintly, because he's got something to come back to now, and that makes all the difference. Celine looked at her. You knew. About us. Everyone knows. You're not exactly subtle. Does it bother you? Why would it bother me? Because I'm... Celine stopped. I don't know. An outsider. Someone who doesn't belong here. You belong here more than most of the people who work for him. Anna's voice was firm. You make him human, and that's something he hasn't been in a long time. Celine didn't know what to say to that. She looked down at the baby, watched her sleep, and tried to believe that Anna was right. Roman came back 3 hours later. Celine heard the door open downstairs, heard voices, heard footsteps. She stayed in the nursery waiting. He appeared in the doorway, his clothes dirty but not bloody, his face unreadable. It's done, he said. Is he dead? No, but he will be if he doesn't leave the city by morning. Roman stepped into the room. I made it very clear that if I see him again, I'll finish what I started. What did you do? You don't want to know. Yes, I do. Roman sighed. I broke his kneecaps, told him that was just the beginning. Then I had Marco drive him to the train station and put him on the first train out of town. He paused. He won't come back. Celine's hands were shaking. She set the baby down in the crib, stood, walked over to Roman. Thank you, she said. Don't thank me. I didn't do it for you. Then who did you do it for? Myself. Roman's voice was rough. Because I couldn't stand the thought of him breathing the same air as you and your kids. Celine kissed him. It was softer this time, slower, and when they pulled apart, Roman was looking at her like she was something fragile and precious and utterly terrifying. I don't know how to do this, he said quietly. Neither do I. Then I guess we'll figure it out together. For 3 days, everything was calm. Damien was gone. Victor hadn't made a move. Roman's captains reported that the rumors were dying down, that the other crews were backing off. It felt like maybe, just maybe, they'd gotten through the worst of it. Then Marco came into the kitchen on the 4th morning with a file in his hand and murder in his eyes. We've got a problem, he said. Roman looked up from his coffee. What kind of problem? Marco slid the file across the table. Roman opened it, read for a moment, and his face went white. What is it? Celine asked. Roman didn't answer. He just kept reading, his jaw getting tighter with every line. Roman, Celine said. What is it? He closed the file, looked at her. Damien didn't just marry you because your family owed his. What do you mean? I mean, it was planned, from the beginning. Roman's voice was cold. Your father didn't owe Damien's family money. He owed mine. Celine's breath stopped. What? 20 years ago, your father borrowed $250,000 from my father to save his business. He couldn't pay it back, so my father let it ride. But the debt was still there. Roman's hands were shaking. When my father died, and I took over, I inherited that debt. And Damien found out about it. I don't understand. He married you to get to me. Roman's voice was raw. He thought if he could tie himself to your family, he could use that debt as leverage, force me to back his deals, give him protection, whatever he needed. And when you didn't give him the son he wanted, when you became a liability instead of an asset, he decided to cut his losses. Celine felt like the floor had dropped out from under her. So this whole time you were a pawn in a game you didn't even know you were playing. Roman stood, started pacing. And I didn't know either, because my father never told me about the debt. I found out 3 hours ago when Marco pulled the records. Why does it matter now? Because Damien's not done. Roman stopped, looked at her. He's been telling the Volkovs and every other crew in this city that you're his wife, his property, and that I stole you to spite him. But that's not the whole story. He's also been telling them that by protecting you, I'm protecting his claim to your family's debt. Which means, if they take you from me, they get leverage over me and access to whatever's left of your father's estate. Celine's chest tightened. There's nothing left. My father lost everything before he died. They don't know that. And Damien's betting they won't check. Roman's voice was bitter. He's turned you into a target, and now every crew in the city thinks you're worth something. So what do we do? I don't know. Roman's face was dark. But we're running out of time. Victor's already moving, and if he gets to you before I can stop him— He didn't finish. He didn't have to. Celine stood, walked over to him. Then we leave. We take the kids and we disappear, tonight. I can't just leave. This is my city, my territory. Then you'll die defending it, and I'll die with you, and Iris and Maya will end up in the system, or worse. Celine's voice cracked. Is that what you want? Roman stared at her. No. Then we leave, now, before it's too late. Roman was silent for a long time. Then he turned to Marco. How long do we have? A day. Maybe 2 if we're lucky. Marco's voice was grim. Victor's crew is already watching the estate. They're waiting for the right moment. Then we don't give them one. Roman looked at Celine. Pack light. We leave in an hour. The safe house was 3 hours north, hidden in the mountains at the end of a dirt road that didn't show up on any map. Roman had bought it years ago under a fake name, kept it stocked and ready for emergencies. They drove through the night with Marco at the wheel and Roman in the passenger seat, his gun in his lap. Celine sat in the back with Iris asleep against her shoulder and the baby in her arms. They didn't speak. There was nothing to say. When they finally pulled up to the house, a small cabin surrounded by trees, isolated and dark, Roman got out first, checked the perimeter, signaled that it was clear. Marco carried Iris inside while Celine followed with the baby. The cabin was sparse but functional. 2 bedrooms, a kitchen, a fireplace. Roman had Marco do another sweep while he got the generator running. Within an hour, they had heat and light. Celine put Iris in one of the beds, tucked her in, kissed her forehead. The little girl didn't wake. In the other room, Celine laid the baby in a makeshift crib Marco had found in the closet. When she came back out, Roman was standing by the window, staring out at the trees. We can't stay here forever, she said. I know. So what's the plan? Roman didn't turn around. I don't have one yet. That's not like you. None of this is like me. His voice was rough. I don't run. I don't hide. And I sure as hell don't leave my territory to vultures like Victor. Then what are we doing here? Buying time. Roman finally looked at her. I need to figure out how to end this without getting you killed. What about you? What about me? Are you planning to get yourself killed? Roman's jaw tightened. If that's what it takes to keep you safe, then yes. Celine crossed the room, grabbed his arm, forced him to face her. No, absolutely not. Celine, I didn't leave everything behind just to watch you throw your life away. Her voice was fierce. We're in this together, remember? That means you don't get to play martyr. I'm not playing. Then what do you call it? I call it being realistic. Roman's eyes were dark. Victor wants my territory. Damien wants you. And between the 2 of them, they've turned this into a war I can't win without losing everything that matters. So we find another way. There is no other way. Yes, there is. Celine's grip tightened. We make them think they've won. We give them what they want, or make them think we did, and then we disappear for real. New names, new lives, somewhere they'll never find us. Roman stared at her. You want me to walk away from everything I've built? I want you to live, and I want my daughters to grow up with a father figure who doesn't get himself killed trying to save us. I'm not their father. No, but you could be. Celine's voice broke. If you let yourself. Roman's expression cracked. He pulled her into his arms, held her tight, his face buried in her hair. I don't know how to do this, he said again. Then we'll learn. Celine held him back just as tight. Together. They stood there in the middle of the cabin, 2 broken people holding on to each other like they were the only solid thing in the world. Outside, the wind howled through the trees. Inside, for the first time in days, Celine let herself believe they might actually make it through this. Then the window exploded. Glass shattered inward, and Roman threw Celine to the ground, covering her body with his. Gunfire erupted, tearing through the walls. Marco was shouting something, returning fire. Roman dragged Celine toward the hallway. Get the kids, he yelled. Now! Celine scrambled to her feet, ran to the bedroom. Iris was screaming, terrified. Celine grabbed her, ran to the other room, scooped up the baby. She could hear more gunfire, could smell smoke. Roman appeared in the doorway. Back door. Go. What about you? I'll hold them off. Marco's got the car running. Go. Roman, go. Celine ran. She burst through the back door into the freezing night, Iris clinging to her neck and the baby wailing in her arms. Marco was at the car, engine running, driver's door open. Get in, he shouted. Celine climbed into the back seat. Marco slammed the door, jumped into the driver's seat. More gunfire. The rear window shattered. Celine threw herself over the girls, shielding them with her body. Where's Roman? She screamed. He's coming! But he wasn't. The cabin was engulfed in flames now, orange and furious against the black sky. Men were pouring out of the trees, armed, shouting, and Roman was still inside. We have to go back, Celine yelled. He told me to get you out. Marco threw the car into gear. That's what I'm doing. No, we can't leave him. He's buying us time. The car lurched forward. Celine twisted in her seat, staring back at the burning cabin. She saw Roman burst through the front door, saw him raise his gun, saw him fire at the men closing in. Then she saw one of the vehicles explode in a ball of fire, saw the shockwave knock Roman off his feet. No, Celine screamed. Marco floored it. The car fishtailed on the dirt road, found traction, roared into the darkness. Celine kept staring back, kept searching the flames for any sign of movement. But Roman was gone. And so was everything else. Marco drove for 2 hours without stopping. Celine sat in the back seat with Iris pressed against her chest, and the baby finally quiet in her arms, staring out the window at nothing. Her mind kept replaying the explosion, the flames, Roman falling. She kept waiting for her brain to process it, to make it real, but it wouldn't. It felt like something happening to someone else. He's not dead, she said. Marco's eyes flicked to the rearview mirror. Celine, he's not dead. He can't be. Marco didn't respond. He just kept driving. They ended up at a motel off Highway 17, the kind of place that took cash and didn't ask questions. Marco paid for a room at the far end of the building, carried Iris inside while Celine followed with the baby. The room smelled like cigarettes and mildew, but it had 2 beds and a lock on the door. Marco set Iris down gently on one of the beds. The little girl was still asleep, exhausted from crying. Celine laid the baby next to her, tucked a blanket around them both. Stay here, Marco said. Don't open the door for anyone but me. Where are you going? To make some calls, figure out what the hell just happened. Marco's face was grim. Lock the door behind me. He left. Celine locked the door, checked the windows, pulled the curtains shut. Then she sat on the edge of the bed and stared at her hands. They were shaking. She couldn't make them stop. Iris stirred, opened her eyes. Mama? I'm here, baby. Where's Mr. Roman? Celine's throat closed. He had to go away for a little while. Is he coming back? Celine wanted to say yes. Wanted to promise that everything would be okay, that Roman would walk through the door any minute with that half smile he only gave when Iris said something that surprised him. But she couldn't lie. Not about this. I don't know, she said quietly. Iris started crying. Celine pulled her into her lap, held her tight, and cried with her. Marco came back an hour later. His face was worse than before, pale, tight, like he'd seen something he couldn't unsee. What did you find out? Celine asked. Marco sat down heavily in the chair by the door. The cabin's gone, burned to the ground. Local fire department's calling it a gas leak, but we both know what it really was. And Roman? Marco looked at her. No body. Celine's heart lurched. What does that mean? It means either he got out or someone took him. Marco ran a hand over his face. I've got people looking, but it's been 3 hours and no one's seen him. No calls, no messages, nothing. So he could still be alive. Maybe, or maybe... Marco stopped. We don't know yet. Celine stood, started pacing. Who hit the cabin? Was it Victor? Yeah, him and at least a dozen of his men. They came in heavy, armed for a siege. Marco's voice was bitter. Someone tipped them off. Had to. There's no way they found that place on their own. Who? I don't know. But when I find out, I'm going to kill them myself. Celine stopped pacing. What about Damien? Where is he? That's the other thing. Marco's jaw tightened. He's back in the city. Showed up yesterday, bragging to anyone who'd listen that he's got Roman right where he wants him. He knew about the cabin. Had to, which means he's been working with Victor longer than we thought. Marco stood. And now they've got what they wanted. Roman's gone. His territory's up for grabs, and you're leverage, Celine finished. I'm still leverage. Yeah. Celine looked at her daughters sleeping on the bed. Iris's face was streaked with tears. The baby's tiny fist curled against the pillow. She thought about Roman holding Iris on his lap, reading to her, promising he wouldn't leave. She thought about the way he'd looked at her in his office, the way he'd kissed her like she was the only real thing in his world. She thought about him falling. I'm not running anymore, she said. Marco frowned. What? I'm not running. If Damien and Victor want me, they can come get me. But I'm not going to hide while Roman's out there somewhere. Maybe alive, maybe dying, because I was too scared to do anything about it. Celine, that's insane. Maybe. But I don't care. She turned to face him. You said Roman's territory is up for grabs. That means his people are vulnerable. Which means if we don't do something, Victor's going to tear through them like they're nothing. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting we hit back. Celine's voice was hard. We find out where Victor is, where Damien is, and we make them pay for what they did. Marco stared at her. You have no idea what you're talking about. Then explain it to me. Because right now, sitting in this motel room waiting for someone to find us sounds like a great way to get my daughters killed. Marco was silent for a long moment. Then he said, if we do this, there's no going back. You understand that? I understand. And if Roman's dead, he's not. Selena's voice didn't waver. He's not dead. I'd know if he was. Marco looked like he wanted to argue, but something in her face stopped him. Okay, he said finally. Then here's what we do, Yichen. The plan was simple. Too simple, really, but they didn't have time for complicated. Marco had contacts, people who still owed Roman favors, people who hadn't yet switched sides. He'd reach out, gather intel, find out where Victor was operating from. Then they'd figure out the next move. And Damien? Celine asked. Leave him to me, Marco said. I've got a score to settle with that piece of shit. I want to be there when you find him. Marco shook his head. No, you stay here with the kids. I'm not putting you in the line of fire. I'm already in the line of fire, and I'm tired of other people fighting my battles. This isn't your battle. Yes, it is. Celine's voice was fierce. Damien made it my battle the day he married me. Roman made it my battle when he saved my life. And now you're telling me I have to sit here and do nothing while everyone I care about risks their lives? No, I'm done with that. Marco studied her. You really mean this? Yes. Fine. But if we're doing this, we do it my way. You follow my lead, you don't take risks, and if I tell you to run, you run. Deal? Deal. They shook on it. It felt absurd, making deals about violence and revenge in a cheap motel room while two little girls slept 10 feet away. But Celine didn't have the luxury of feeling absurd. She only had the luxury of doing what needed to be done. Marco left again to make more calls. Celine sat with her daughters and tried not to think about all the ways this could go wrong. By the next morning, Marco had a location. Victor was holed up in a warehouse district on the south side, same place where the first meeting had gone bad. He had at least 20 men with him, maybe more. Damien was there too, apparently playing the role of advisor, feeding Victor information about Roman's operations. They think they've won, Marco said, which makes them sloppy. How do we use that? Celine asked. We don't go in guns blazing. We go quiet, get in, get information, get out. Marco spread a map on the motel room table. There's a service entrance here on the east side, less guarded. We slip in, find out if they know where Roman is, and then we decide what to do next. And if they don't know? Then we make them tell us. Celine looked at the map. It felt surreal, planning a break-in like they were in some kind of action movie. But this was her life now. This was what survival looked like. When do we go? She asked. Tonight, after dark. Marco folded the map. I've got someone watching the kids, Anna. She's on her way now. Anna's still with us? She never left. Most of Roman's people haven't. They're just waiting to see what happens next. Marco's voice was grim. But if we don't move soon, Victor's going to pick them off one by one. Anna arrived an hour later, looking tired but determined. She hugged Celine tight, didn't ask questions, just took the girls into the adjoining room and started playing with Iris like everything was normal. Celine watched through the doorway, her chest tight. If this went wrong, if she didn't come back, Anna would take care of them. She'd made Marco promise. But it didn't make leaving any easier. "You ready?" Marco asked. Celine looked at her daughters one more time, then she turned away. "Yeah," she said. "Let's go." The warehouse was exactly as bleak as Celine remembered. Rusted metal, broken windows, the smell of oil and decay. Marco parked 3 blocks away, and they approached on foot, staying in the shadows. He had a gun. So did she. A small pistol he'd given her in the car, showed her how to use. She'd never held a gun before. It felt wrong in her hand, heavy and cold. "Stay behind me," Marco whispered, "and don't shoot unless you have to." They slipped through the service entrance. Inside, the warehouse was dimly lit, full of crates and equipment. Voices echoed from the far end, men laughing, arguing. Celine followed Marco deeper into the building, her heart hammering so hard she thought everyone could hear it. They found a vantage point behind a stack of crates. From there, Celine could see Victor standing near a makeshift desk, talking on a phone. Damien was next to him, looking smug and self-satisfied. "I don't see Roman," Marco whispered. "Maybe they're lying. Maybe they don't have him. Or maybe he's already dead and they dumped the body." Celine's chest tightened. "No, he's alive. He has to be." Marco didn't argue. He pulled out his own phone, started recording the conversation. Victor's voice carried across the warehouse. "Telling you, DaCosta's done. The explosion took him out, and now his whole operation's falling apart. You want in on the territory? Now's the time." The person on the other end said something Celine couldn't hear. Victor laughed. "Yeah, the wife's still loose, but we'll find her. She's got 2 kids and no resources. How far can she get?" Damien leaned in. "She's more useful alive anyway. We can use her to draw out any of DaCosta's people who are still loyal." "You think there are any left?" "Marco, maybe. A few others. But they're nothing without DaCosta." Damien's voice was smug. "And even if he did survive, he's got no allies, no territory, no way to fight back. He's finished." Victor ended the call, turned to Damien. "You're sure about this?" "I'm sure. DaCosta's either dead or close enough. And Celine," Damien smiled. "She's mine, always has been." Celine's hands clenched around the gun. She wanted to step out from behind the crates, wanted to put a bullet in Damien's smug face. But Marco's hand closed around her wrist, held her back. "Not yet," he breathed. They stayed there for another 10 minutes, listening. Victor made more calls coordinating raids on Roman's remaining operations. Damien bragged about how he'd played everyone, how he'd used Celine as bait to draw Roman out, how he'd fed Victor information about the cabin. By the time they slipped back out of the warehouse, Celine was shaking with rage. "He set us up," she said once they were back in the car. "Damien knew exactly where we'd go, and he told Victor." "Yeah," Marco's voice was cold. "Which means he's the reason Roman's missing. Maybe the reason he's dead." "He's not dead." "Celine, he's not." She turned to Marco. "If Roman was dead, Victor would be crowing about it. He'd be showing off the body, making an example. But he's not. Which means they don't have him." Marco considered that. Or they lost him in the explosion and don't want to admit it. Or he got out and he's hiding somewhere, waiting for the right moment. Celine's voice was fierce. "Either way, we need to find him before Victor does." "How? We don't have any leads." Celine thought hard. "The cabin. You said it burned down, but if Roman got out, he would have headed somewhere safe. Somewhere Victor doesn't know about." "Like where?" "I don't know, but you do. You've worked with him for years. Where would he go?" Marco was silent for a long moment. Then his eyes widened. "The boat." "What boat?" "Roman has a boat. Keeps it docked at a private marina about 50 miles north of here. He never uses it, never talks about it. It's his backup plan. If everything goes to hell, that's where he'd go." "Then that's where we go." Marco started the engine. "If I'm wrong, you're not. But if I am, and we waste time chasing ghosts while Victor's tearing apart what's left of Roman's people, then we'll deal with it. But right now, Finding Roman is the priority. Celine's voice was steady. Because if he's alive, he's the only one who can stop this. Marco nodded. Okay, let's go. The marina was small, tucked into a cove surrounded by trees. Only a dozen boats, all expensive, all pristine. Marco parked in the lot, and they walked down to the docks, scanning the slips. There, Marco said, pointing. The boat was a sleek cabin cruiser, 30 feet long, dark blue hull. The name on the stern read Second Chance. Celine felt something twist in her chest. They approached cautiously. The boat looked empty, dark. But as they got closer, Celine saw movement inside the cabin. Marco drew his gun. Stay back. He stepped onto the boat, moved toward the cabin door. It opened before he reached it. Roman stood in the doorway. He was alive. Barely. His face was bruised and cut, his shirt torn and bloody. He had a gun in one hand and was leaning heavily against the doorframe like it was the only thing keeping him upright. Marco, he said, his voice rough. Took you long enough. Then his eyes found Celine and his expression cracked. Jesus, he breathed. You're okay. Celine didn't remember moving. 1 second she was on the dock, the next she was on the boat, throwing her arms around him. Roman caught her, held her tight despite the pain it clearly caused him. You're alive, Celine sobbed into his chest. You're alive. Yeah, I'm alive. Roman's voice was shaking. Barely, but yeah. Marco holstered his gun. What the hell happened? Explosion knocked me out. When I came to, the place was crawling with Victor's men. I managed to slip out through the woods, steal a car, drove here. Roman pulled back from Celine, looked at her. I thought you were dead. I thought they got you. Marco got us out. Where are the girls? Safe. With Anna. Celine touched his face, her hands gentle on the bruises. You look terrible. I feel worse. Roman tried to smile, winced. But I'm not dead yet. Can you walk? I can do whatever I need to do. He looked at Marco. What's the situation? Marco filled him in. The motel, the warehouse, Victor's plans, Damien's betrayal. Roman listened without interrupting, his face getting darker with every word. So they think I'm dead, he said when Marco finished. Yeah, or close enough. Roman nodded slowly. Good. We can use that. Use it how? Celine asked. Celine none. Roman looked at her, and despite the pain and exhaustion in his eyes, there was something else there too. Something cold and calculating and absolutely merciless. We let them think they've won, he said. We let Victor take my territory, let Damien strut around like he's untouchable. And then, when they're comfortable, when they think it's over, we burn it all down. Marco started. Go on. I'm done playing defense. I'm done reacting. Roman's voice was hard. They came after my people. They came after Celine and her kids. They tried to kill me in my own safe house. That's not something I'm going to let slide. What are you planning? Celine asked. Roman looked at her. I'm planning to take everything Victor has and destroy it. His operations, his crew, his reputation. I'm going to make him regret the day he decided to come after me. And Damien? Roman's eyes were ice. Damien's mine. Bum. They spent the next 2 days on the boat, planning. Roman was hurt worse than he'd let on. Cracked ribs, concussion, burns on his arms from the explosion, but he refused to slow down. He made call after call, reaching out to the people who still owed him favors, the ones who hadn't yet bent the knee to Victor. Turned out there were more than Celine expected. Roman had spent 10 years building his empire on loyalty and fear in equal measure, and most of his people hadn't forgotten that. When word spread that he was alive, that he was coming back, they started coming back too. Marco coordinated. Anna brought the girls to the marina, set them up in the boat's cabin with books and toys. Iris was delighted to see Roman again, threw herself at him despite his injuries. The baby slept through most of it, oblivious. Celine watched Roman with her daughters and felt something settle in her chest. He was hurt, exhausted, running on nothing but rage and determination. But when Iris climbed into his lap and demanded he read to her, he did. When the baby cried, he held her until she calmed. He didn't have to do any of it, but he did anyway. On the third night, after the girls were asleep, Roman and Celine sat on the deck under the stars. I've been thinking, Roman said. About what? About what happens after. Assuming we survive this. Celine looked at him. And? And I don't want to go back to the way things were. Running the city, always looking over my shoulder, waiting for the next victor to show up. Roman's voice was quiet. I'm tired, Celine. I'm tired of the violence and the lies and the constant fighting. So what do you want? I want out. All the way out. He turned to her. I want to disappear. Take you and the girls somewhere safe. Somewhere no one knows us. Start over. You'd give up everything? Everything I have now? Yeah. In a heartbeat. Roman reached for her hand. But I need to end this first. I need to make sure Victor and Damien can't come after us. That means taking them down, taking down everyone connected to them, and making it so permanent that no one dares to follow. That sounds like a war. It is a war, and I'm going to win it. Roman's eyes were hard. Then I'm going to burn my empire to the ground so no one else can have it. Celine stared at him. You're serious. Dead serious, Likes. Why? Because you were right. I've been holding on to this city like it's the only thing that matters, but it's not. You matter. Iris and Maya matter. And if I have to choose between them and my territory, there's no choice. Roman's voice cracked. I saw what happened to my mother when my father chose his empire over her. I'm not making the same mistake. Celine's throat tightened. What if we can't win? What if Victor? We'll win. Roman's voice was certain. Because I'm not fighting for territory anymore. I'm fighting for you. And that makes me a hell of a lot more dangerous than Victor knows. He kissed her, and Celine kissed him back, tasting blood and smoke and desperation. When they pulled apart, she rested her forehead against his. Promise me something, she said. Anything. Promise me we both make it through this. You, me, the girls, all of us. Roman hesitated. I can't. Promise me. He looked into her eyes, and whatever he saw there made him nod. I promise, he said. Celine knew he couldn't guarantee it, knew that promises meant nothing in the face of bullets and explosions and men like Victor who didn't care who they hurt. But she held on to it anyway, because it was all she had. The plan came together fast. Roman had contacts in the federal system, people he'd paid off over the years, people who owed him. He reached out to one of them, a prosecutor named Callahan who'd been trying to take down the Volkovs for half a decade. I can give you Victor, Roman said over the phone. His entire operation, shipment routes, financial records, names of everyone on his payroll, everything you need to put him away for life. In exchange for what? Callahan asked. Immunity. For me and my people. And a clean slate. You're asking me to let you walk after everything you've done. I'm asking you to take down someone worse than me and call it a win. Roman's voice was hard. You want Victor or not? There was a long pause. Then Callahan said, Send me what you've got. If it's solid, we'll talk. Roman sent the files. He'd been keeping records for years. Insurance, in case he ever needed leverage. Now he was cashing it all in. 2 days later, Callahan called back. This is good. Better than good. But I need more. I need Victor caught in the act, not just on paper. Then set up a raid. I'll make sure he's where you need him to be. And Damien Vale? Roman's jaw tightened. Leave him to me. Roman, leave him to me, Roman repeated. You get Victor and his crew. I get Damien. That's the deal. Another pause. Then, fine. But if this goes sideways, you're on your own. Understood. Roman hung up, looked at Celine. It's done. The raid's in 3 days. And Damien? I'll handle him before the raid. Make sure he's not around to complicate things. Roman's eyes were cold. One way or another, this ends. Celine nodded. She should have felt relief, should have felt hope, but all she felt was dread, heavy and cold in her chest. Because she knew that when men like Roman said one way or another, they meant exactly that. And not everyone was going to walk away. The night before the raid, Roman couldn't sleep. He stood on the deck of the boat, staring out at the dark water, and tried to remember the last time he'd felt something other than anger or fear or the cold calculation that had kept him alive this long. It had been in his office, he realized, when Celine had stood in front of him and told him she wasn't going anywhere, when he'd kissed her and felt for just a moment like maybe he deserved something good. He heard footsteps behind him. Celine appeared at his side, wrapped in one of his jackets, her hair loose around her shoulders. Can't sleep either? She asked. No. Thinking about tomorrow? Thinking about all the ways it could go wrong. Roman didn't look at her. Thinking about what happens if I don't make it back. You'll make it back. You don't know that. No. But I believe it anyway. Celine leaned against the railing next to him. And you promised me. Remember? Roman finally looked at her. Promises don't stop bullets. No, but they give you a reason to dodge them. She took his hand. You've spent your whole life fighting to survive, Roman. This time, you're fighting for something more. That has to count for something. Does it? Yes. Her voice was firm. Because survival isn't the same as living. I learned that the hard way. And so did you. Roman was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, if something happens to me tomorrow, if I don't make it, I need you to promise me something. Don't. Promise me you'll take the girls and disappear. Use the money I set aside. Start over somewhere safe. Don't look back. Celine's eyes were wet. I'm not making that promise. Celine, no. Because you're coming back. We're both coming back. And then we're going to do exactly what you said. Disappear together. She squeezed his hand. So stop talking like you're already dead and start figuring out how to stay alive. Roman pulled her close, buried his face in her hair. She smelled like salt and soap and something softer, something he couldn't name. He held her like she was the only real thing left in the world. I love you, he said quietly. I don't think I've said that yet, but I do. Celine's breath caught. I love you too. They stood there under the stars, two people who'd been broken by the world and somehow found each other anyway. And Roman let himself believe, just for a moment, that maybe they really would make it through this. The next morning dawned gray and cold. Roman gathered everyone on the boat, Marco, Anna, 3 other men who'd stayed loyal. He laid out the plan one more time. Victor's crew will be at the warehouse tonight for a big shipment. The feds will hit them at 9. Our job is to make sure Victor's there when they do. Roman looked at each of them in turn. Marco, you're coordinating with Callahan. Make sure the timing's right. Anna, you stay here with the girls. Everyone else, you're with me. And Damien? Marco asked. I'm handling Damien separately, before the raid. Roman's voice was flat. He's not getting anywhere near federal custody. Marco nodded. No one argued. They all knew what that meant. Celine stood. I'm coming with you. No. Yes. Celine, this isn't negotiable. Her voice was steel. Damien's my husband, my nightmare. I've earned the right to face him. Roman wanted to argue, wanted to lock her in the cabin and keep her safe, but he looked at her, at the set of her jaw, the fire in her eyes, and knew it wouldn't matter. She'd made up her mind. Fine, he said, but you stay behind me, and if things go bad, you run. Deal. They found Damien at a bar on the east side, the kind of place where deals were made in the back room and nobody noticed when people left bleeding. Roman had gotten a tip from one of his remaining contacts. Damien was meeting with some of Victor's men, finalizing the split of Roman's former territory. Roman parked 2 blocks away. He and Celine walked to the bar, both armed, both silent. Marco stayed in the car, engine running, ready for a fast exit. Inside, the bar was dim and smoky. Damien was in a booth near the back, laughing with 2 men Celine didn't recognize. He had a drink in his hand and looked more relaxed than she'd ever seen him. Roman walked up to the table. The 2 men saw him first, their faces going pale. One of them reached for a gun. Don't, Roman said quietly. The man froze. Damien turned, saw Roman, and his face went white. You're supposed to be dead. Surprise. Roman's voice was cold. Get up. I'm not going anywhere with you. Roman pulled his gun, aimed it at Damien's head. Get up. Damien stood slowly, his hands raised. The 2 men at the table didn't move. They weren't stupid enough to get between Roman DaCosta and someone he wanted dead. Roman gestured toward the back door. Walk. They went out into the alley. It was empty, cold, the kind of place where bad things happened and nobody asked questions. Damien turned to face them, his arrogance cracking. You can't kill me, he said. Victor's going to be in federal custody by midnight, Roman interrupted. along with everyone stupid enough to work with him, which means you've got no allies, no protection, and no way out. Damien's eyes darted to Celine. You put him up to this. No, Celine said, but I'm not stopping him either. You're my wife. You belong to me. I was never yours. Celine's voice was hard. I was a debt, a bargaining chip, but I'm not anymore. Damien laughed, bitter and sharp. You think you're free? You think he's going to save you? He's a monster, Celine. Worse than me. Maybe, Celine said, but he's never raised a hand to me. He's never looked at our daughters like they were worthless, and he's never tried to kill me for not giving him what he wanted. Our daughters? Damien's face twisted. They're not his. They're mine. No, Roman said. They're hers, and if you ever come near them again, I'll make sure you regret it. Damien turned back to Roman. So what, you're going to kill me? In an alley like some common thug? I thought about it, Roman said. Thought about putting a bullet in your head and leaving you here for the rats, but that would be too easy. He pulled out a phone, held it up. On the screen was a recording, Damien at the warehouse, bragging about how he'd set Roman up, how he'd fed Victor information, how he'd planned to use Celine as bait. I'm sending this to Callahan, Roman said, along with evidence that you've been laundering money through your nightclub, that you've been dealing in stolen goods, that you assaulted your wife and tried to murder her and your children. You're going to prison, Damien, and you're never getting out. Damien's face went red. You can't. I already did. Roman's smile was cold. But here's the thing. Prison's full of people who don't like men who hurt women and kids. And I've got friends inside. So when you get there, they're going to know exactly what you did. And they're going to make sure you pay for it every single day for the rest of your life. Damien lunged at him. Roman sidestepped, brought the gun down hard on the back of Damien's head. Damien collapsed, unconscious. Roman looked at Celine. You okay? Celine stared down at the man who'd terrorized her for 3 years, who'd beaten her and broken her and tried to kill her. She felt nothing. No satisfaction, no relief, not even anger. Just emptiness. Yeah, she said. I'm okay. Roman pulled out his phone, made a call. Callahan, I've got a gift for you. 20 minutes later, federal agents swarmed the alley. They took Damien away in handcuffs, still unconscious. Roman and Celine slipped out the back, got in the car with Marco, and drove away. It's done, Marco said. Not yet, Roman replied. We still need to make sure Victor goes down. The raid happened exactly as planned. At 9 o'clock, federal agents hit the warehouse with warrants and enough firepower to take down a small army. Victor and his crew didn't stand a chance. By 9:30, they were all in custody, the shipment seized, and Victor's entire operation in ruins. Roman watched from a distance, standing on a rooftop 3 blocks away with a pair of binoculars. Celine stood next to him, her hand in his. It's over, she said. Not quite. Roman lowered the binoculars. There's one more thing I need to do. The next morning, Roman made a series of calls. To his remaining captains, to the people who still ran pieces of his former empire. He told them the same thing. He was out. Done. Anyone who wanted his territory could have it, but he wasn't fighting anymore. Some of them argued. Some of them tried to convince him to stay, but Roman was firm. I'm disappearing, he said, and if anyone comes looking for me, they're not going to like what they find. He transferred his assets, the legitimate ones, into accounts he'd set up under fake names. The rest, the dirty money, he funneled to Callahan as part of the immunity deal. By the end of the day, Roman da Costa was officially broke, powerless, and out of the game, and exactly where he wanted to be. They left the city 3 days later, Roman, Celine, Iris, and Maya, all packed into a car with nothing but suitcases and a future they'd have to build from scratch. Anna came too, because she'd been with Roman too long to start over anywhere else. Marco stayed behind, took over what was left of Roman's operations, promised to keep things clean. You sure about this? Marco asked as they were loading the car. Yeah, Roman said, I'm sure. What are you going to do? I don't know yet, but I'll figure it out. Roman shook his hand. Thanks. For everything. You'd have done the same for me. Maybe, Roman smiled. Probably not, but I appreciate it anyway. They drove north, up the coast, until they found a small town that looked like it had been frozen in time. White houses with blue shutters. A main street with a bakery and a bookstore and a general store. The kind of place where people knew their neighbors and nobody asked too many questions if you kept to yourself. Roman rented a house on the edge of town, small but comfortable, with a yard where Iris could play and a view of the ocean. He and Celine settled in slowly, learning how to be normal people. It was harder than either of them expected. Roman didn't know how to live without looking over his shoulder. Every car that drove past made his hand drift toward a gun he no longer carried. Every stranger made him tense. It took weeks before he could sleep through the night without waking up in a cold sweat. Celine had her own struggles. She'd spent so long being afraid, so long being controlled, that freedom felt foreign. She'd stand in the grocery store staring at rows of cereal and forget what she was supposed to buy. She'd lie awake at night waiting for Damien to walk through the door, even though she knew he was locked up 300 miles away. But slowly, day by day, they figured it out. Roman got a job at a local art gallery, talking to tourists about paintings he didn't understand and making minimum wage. It was humbling and boring and nothing like running a criminal empire. He loved it. Celine enrolled in a nursing program at the community college, finished the degree she'd started before Damien. She volunteered at a women's shelter on weekends, helping other women who'd been through what she had. It was hard, reliving her own trauma every time she heard a new story, but it also felt right. Like maybe she could take all the bad things that had happened to her and turn them into something good. Iris started kindergarten. She made friends, learned to read, stopped flinching every time someone raised their voice. The nightmares didn't go away completely, but they got less frequent. She called Roman Dad one day without thinking about it, and he didn't correct her. Maya grew from a baby into a toddler, all chubby cheeks and wild curls. She didn't remember Damien, didn't remember the brownstone or the blood or the fear. To her, Roman was just Dad, and this little house by the ocean was the only home she'd ever known. Anna opened a bakery on Main Street. It was small, just her and one part-time employee, but it did well. People loved her pastries, her coffee, the way she remembered everyone's names. She didn't talk about her past, and no one asked. For 2 years, they lived like this. Quiet, normal, safe. It wasn't perfect. Roman still had nightmares about his mother, about the cabin burning, about all the people he'd hurt over the years. Celine still had panic attacks when she saw men who looked like Damien. Iris still asked sometimes if her real dad was ever coming back, but they had each other, and that was enough. On a warm evening in late spring, 3 years after they'd left the city, Roman took Celine for a walk on the beach. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Iris and Maya were back at the house with Anna, probably covered in flour from helping make dinner. They walked in silence for a while, just listening to the waves. Then Roman stopped, turned to face her. "I've been thinking," he said. "About what?" "About the fact that we've been living together for 3 years, raising 2 kids together, building a life together, and I've never actually asked you to marry me." Celine's breath caught. "Roman." He pulled a small box out of his pocket, opened it. Inside was a simple silver band engraved with 4 words. Choice, not chance. "I know we've both been married before," Roman said. "And I know yours was hell, and mine never happened because I was too busy building an empire I didn't even want. But this, us, this is different." He took her hand. "You're not a debt. You're not a bargaining chip. You're not someone I saved because I had to. You're the person I choose every single day to build a life with." Celine's eyes were wet. "You're really asking me this?" "Yeah, I really am." Roman's voice was rough. "So what do you say? Will you marry me?" Celine looked at the ring, at the man holding it, at the life they'd built from the wreckage of everything they'd lost. She thought about the woman she'd been 3 years ago, broken, terrified, convinced she'd never be free. She thought about the man Roman had been, cold, ruthless, convinced he didn't deserve anything good. They'd both been wrong. "Yes," she said, "I'll marry you." Roman slipped the ring onto her finger, pulled her close, kissed her like they had all the time in the world. And for the first time in either of their lives, they did. Young. They got married 2 months later in a small ceremony on the beach. Iris was the flower girl, scattering petals with serious concentration. Maya sat with Anna in the front row, clapping her hands and laughing. Marco drove up from the city, stood as Roman's best man, and didn't make a single joke about how domestic Roman had gotten. The ceremony was simple, No elaborate vows, no grand gestures, just two people who'd survived hell promising to face whatever came next together. When the officiant asked if anyone objected, Iris raised her hand. "Yes, sweetheart?" the officiant asked, trying not to smile. "I just want to say that I'm really happy," Iris said seriously, "because now Mr. Roman is really our dad and we're really a family." Roman's eyes got wet. Celine laughed and cried at the same time. The officiant declared them married and they kissed, while their daughters cheered and Anna wiped her eyes and Marco pretended he had something in his eye too. Afterward, they had dinner at Anna's bakery, just the six of them. They ate too much cake and told stories and laughed until their sides hurt. Maya fell asleep in Roman's arms. Iris made him promise to read to her before bed, even though it was late. When they finally got home, Roman carried both girls upstairs while Celine followed. He tucked them into their beds, kissed their foreheads, turned out the lights. Downstairs, Celine was standing by the window, looking out at the ocean. Roman came up behind her, wrapped his arms around her waist. "You okay?" he asked. "Yeah, I'm just thinking." "About what?" "About how 3 years ago I was lying on a bathroom floor bleeding and convinced my life was over. And now I'm here, married to you, with 2 healthy daughters, and a future that doesn't terrify me." She turned to face him. "How did we get so lucky?" "I don't think it was luck," Roman said. "I think we fought for it, every single day." Celine thought about that, about all the nights she'd stayed awake planning how to escape Damien, all the times Roman had put himself between her and danger, all the moments they'd chosen each other when walking away would have been easier. "Yeah," she said. "I guess we did." They stood there at the quiet house, listening to the ocean and the sound of their daughters breathing upstairs, and Roman realized something he'd never quite understood before. He'd spent his whole life thinking strength meant not needing anyone, that power came from standing alone. But he'd been wrong. Real strength was letting someone see you broken and trusting them not to use it against you. Real power was choosing to be vulnerable, to love, to build something with another person, even when the world kept trying to tear you apart. He'd been afraid of that for so long, afraid of ending up like his mother, destroyed by the violence of his father's world, afraid of becoming his father, cold and cruel and incapable of protecting the people he loved. But Celine had shown him a different path, not the absence of fear, but the courage to move forward despite it. Not the refusal to fight, but the wisdom to know what was worth fighting for. They'd both lost so much. Celine had lost her family, her freedom, years of her life to a man who saw her as property. Roman had lost his mother, his innocence, any hope that he could be something other than what his father had made him. But they'd found something too. In each other, in their daughters, in the quiet life they'd built by the ocean. They'd found proof that the past didn't have to define the future, that broken people could heal, that damaged hearts could learn to love again, that it was never too late to choose a different story. 5 years after they left the city, Iris was 10 years old and Maya was 8. They were normal kids, happy kids, with friends and hobbies and no idea that their parents had once lived in a world of violence and fear. Roman ran the art gallery now, had bought it from the previous owner and turned it into something special. He displayed work from local artists, taught painting classes on weekends, discovered he had an eye for color and composition he'd never known existed. Celine had her nursing degree and worked at the town clinic 3 days a week. The rest of the time she ran the women's shelter she'd started, helping abuse survivors find their way to safety. She'd helped dozens of women over the years, and each one felt like a piece of her own healing. Anna's bakery had expanded. She'd hired 3 employees, started catering weddings and events, become a pillar of the small community. She was dating the bookstore owner, a quiet man with kind eyes who made her laugh. Marco came to visit once a year, usually around the holidays. He'd cleaned up Roman's old territory, turned it into something almost legitimate. No more violence, no more wars, just business. He was thinking about retiring, he said, maybe buying a place by the ocean himself. On a Saturday morning in early fall, Roman and Celine were sitting on their porch watching the girls play in the yard. Iris was teaching Maya how to ride a bike, patient and encouraging despite Maya's wobbling. "You think they'll ever ask about Damien?" Roman asked. "Iris already did, last year." Celine's voice was quiet. She asked why her last name was different from Maya's, why there were 2 names on her birth certificate. "What did you tell her?" "The truth. That her biological father was someone who hurt us, who wasn't safe to be around. That he's in prison now and can't hurt anyone anymore. And that you're her real dad, the one who chose to love her and stay. Roman's throat tightened. What did she say? She said she was glad, that she didn't want any other dad. Celine reached for his hand. She meant it, Roman. You're her father in every way that matters. They sat in comfortable silence, watching their daughters laugh and play, and Roman thought about how strange life was. How the worst night of his life, walking into that brownstone and seeing Celine broken on the floor, had led to the best years he'd ever known. He thought about his mother sometimes, wondered what she'd think of the man he'd become. Not the crime lord she'd feared he'd turn into, but this, a husband, a father, someone who'd walked away from power because love mattered more. He thought she'd be proud. Celine thought about Damien sometimes too, though less and less as the years went by. She'd heard through Marco that he was still in prison, would be for at least another decade. Some of Roman's friends inside had made sure his time there was difficult. She didn't feel guilty about that. She felt nothing at all. The only thing she felt when she thought about those years was gratitude that they were over, that she'd survived, that she'd found the strength to choose a different life, because that's what it came down to in the end. Choice. Damien had tried to take that from her, had treated her like she was something to be owned and controlled. But he'd failed. She'd clawed her way to freedom, had fought for herself and her daughters, had chosen to trust Roman even when trust felt impossible. And Roman, he'd spent his whole life thinking he had no choice, that he was destined to follow in his father's footsteps, to build an empire on violence and fear. But he'd been wrong. He'd chosen to save Celine when he could have walked away. He'd chosen to protect her when it would have been easier to use her as leverage. He'd chosen to burn his empire rather than risk the people he loved. Those choices had cost them both everything they'd thought they needed. Their old lives, their identities, any sense of security or control. But those same choices had given them something infinitely more valuable. A chance to be happy. A chance to heal. A chance to prove that redemption wasn't just possible, it was worth fighting for. That evening, after the girls were in bed, Roman and Celine walked down to the beach. It had become their ritual over the years. A quiet moment at the end of each day, just the two of them and the ocean. Do you ever regret it? Celine asked. Giving up everything you built? No, Roman said without hesitation. Not once. Really? Not even a little? I thought I would. Thought I'd miss the power, the respect, the feeling of being in control. Roman looked out at the waves. But I don't. Because I was never really in control. I was just reacting to my father's legacy, to other people's threats, to my own fear of ending up like my mother. I wasn't living. I was just surviving. And now I'm living. He pulled her close. I've got you. I've got the girls. I've got a job I actually like. And a town full of people who know me as Adrian Cross, the guy who runs the gallery, not Roman DaCosta, the crime lord who ruled half the city. He paused. I've got a life I chose instead of one that was chosen for me. That's worth more than any empire. Celine rested her head on his shoulder. I love you. I love you too. They stood there as the sun set, two people who'd been forged in fire and come out stronger on the other side. They weren't perfect. They still had scars, still had nightmares, still had moments when the past crept up on them. But they had each other. And they had hope. And in a world that had tried so hard to break them, that was the greatest victory of all. Because in the end, their story wasn't about the violence they'd survived or the empire they'd destroyed or the man who'd tried to kill them. It was about two people who'd refused to let their worst moments define them, who'd chosen love over fear, vulnerability over armor, and a quiet life by the ocean over all the power in the world. It was about learning that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from a fight, that sometimes strength looks like admitting you need help, that sometimes redemption means burning down everything you built and starting over from nothing. And most of all, it was about understanding that you don't have to be perfect to deserve happiness. You just have to be willing to keep choosing it day after day, even when it's hard. Celine had learned that in a bathroom where she thought she was going to die, when a stranger kicked down her door and gave her a second chance. Roman had learned it watching his daughters play, realizing that protecting them meant more than protecting his territory ever had. They'd both learned it together, in the years since, building a life that no one, not Damien, not Victor, not even themselves, had thought was possible. And as they walked back to their little house by the ocean, hand in hand, they carried that truth with them like a light in the darkness. That no matter how broken you are, no matter how lost you feel, no matter how many times the world has tried to destroy you, you can still choose hope. You can still choose love. You can still choose to believe that tomorrow might be better than today. And sometimes, if you're very lucky and very brave, that choice is enough to change everything.